In spite of their love of libraries and their high regard for the importance of libraries to communities, most people just don't know much about libraries and librarians. I'm not talking about the old stereotypes of shushing librarians, distressing though that can be. I'm really talking about matters of substance. So I'm going to share with you some research about what people don't know. People think libraries are essentially about books. That was the finding of an OCLC study in 2010, in which 75% said books were the first thing that came to mind when people thought about the library. In other words, the library brand is books. In the Pew Internet 2013 study, 47% of people said that they knew only some of the public library service, and 30% said that they had little or no knowledge of what libraries had to offer. Now, with 91% of people considering the library to be important to their community, we do appear to have many people ready to listen to the library's story. This is an opportunity to develop relationships with people in the community, to listen to what's important to them, and then consider the ways in which the library can work with them. That is how people come to understand what the true potential and outcomes of library services really are. Perceptions of libraries in an academic environment differ depending on who you ask, faculty, students, librarians themselves. For one, according to a report by Ithaca in 2012, faculty tend to see the academic library to be largely about purchasing journals and books and databases to support research and teaching. Another source of information on perceptions of academic libraries is doing a LiveQual survey. LiveQual is a survey instrument through which an academic library system can investigate the expectations of various categories of their members and measure the extent to which their members report that their expectations are met. Findings in the OCLC study of perceptions in 2010 is a good case in point about insiders' perceptions being different from outsiders or these civilians. We learned that college students, for example, begin their information searches at search engines 83% of the time, and not at the library website. Librarians, of course, build these library websites as the starting points for information searching. But college students, as the outsiders, do not necessarily appear to view the library website as a primary service point designed to help them. This raises another point, and that is that it may be time to re-examine our language in the cell. Perhaps the phrase information literacy isn't working as well as many people hoped it would. Certainly not with students who consider themselves to be actually quite information literate, notwithstanding the fact that their behaviors don't demonstrate this. So why aren't we selling this as improving grades and helping them use their time better? They actually care about that. Meanwhile, many administrators of universities and colleges are increasingly making decisions about libraries based on how they view their bottom line. And they're looking for measures of evidence of the library's contributions to the mission and goals of the university. While librarians are talking about service quality and satisfaction, and of course, well they should, and there's nothing wrong with either of those, the administrators are increasingly looking at demonstrated impacts and outcomes in areas such as student recruitment and student retention, student learning, and faculty research productivity. This imperative to demonstrate impacts on priority areas is the focus of a major report for the Association of College and Research Libraries, which is a part of the Value of Academic Libraries initiative. Traditionally, libraries have not measured all these impacts, and in many cases are not sure how to do it, or even perhaps whether it can be done. It's interesting to note that though librarianship has fairly standard definitions and measurements of outputs, including counts of stock and square footage and transactions and so on, we do not have agreed measures of outcomes and impacts throughout the sector. This is actually quite challenging methodologically. However, it is essential that advocates understand the expectations and make disciplined efforts at such assessments, and above all, learn about communicating impacts effectively in the language of their decision makers and their communities, and in effect to demonstrate that they do indeed get it. And of course, this imperative is not limited to academic libraries. It's true of all types of libraries. In special librarianship, where the librarian tends to be the brand and the service, librarians have learned to be proactive and have become deeply embedded in the work of their parent organizations rather than stay with any traditional model of waiting for explicit requests for information. How much do we know about the perceptions of librarians that are held in the special library context? Stephen Abram, former president of the Special Libraries Association, provides us with some summary information.
SLA did a major study on the perceptions of librarians where we interviewed chief executive officers, senior civil servants, people who influenced the success of librarians. There was good news and there was not so good news in it. The good news is we're highly respected for our skills, our competencies. On an individual basis, we do very well with the relationship side of things. The not so good news is that our number one weakness was that we're too slow. And some of the identification of that is that we wait till something's perfect before we deliver it. So the learning we had was deliver research in phases so that they could do it. Like the time crunch in the corporate sector is very different than academic or public libraries or homework. They need to know it quick. We give too much. Like, we want to have comprehensive answers rather than good enough answers. And so there was some learning in that research around how to up our game, largely in terms of behaviors. We can still do the great answer and make it fulsome and comprehensive and authoritative, but we don't have to wait until it's almost too late.
The Special Libraries Association, however, has had a challenging time to retain consensus on the use of the term libraries in its association name, perhaps reflecting the low level of knowledge in society of what libraries actually do. The association's research implied that the name might actually be a barrier, although that research certainly did affirm the value that corporate executives placed on good information. So although SLA members in the end voted against changing the name of their association, they did strengthen their commitment to communicate their unique value within organizations. Now this demonstrates another solid advocacy principle, which is take nothing for granted. In particular, do not assume that anyone knows what a librarian is and does. Tell them in terms they care about, and of course walk the talk, by rooting your explanation and your services in their objectives. In a typical corporate setting, for example, saving time is one of the biggest objectives, as we have heard, so that can be a very good place to start. In the school library sector, it has been a particularly tough proposition to communicate what school librarians do, especially the kind of work they do in collaborating with the principal and with other teachers. Despite a significant and growing body of research that demonstrates the major impact of good school library programs on standardized test scores, the facts unfortunately do not carry the day. And by good school library programs, I mean the facilities, the collections, and above all, that teacher librarian. The unique role and strength of the school library, in fact, remain poorly understood. And school libraries are struggling in many jurisdictions at the hands of decision makers. We have to communicate this information ever more strategically. For one thing, ensuring that relationships of credibility and trust are in place with principals and with other decision makers. It makes no sense for school librarians to be the sole carriers of these messages, and they have unfortunately tended to be the principal carriers. Parents, other teachers, other influencers, in fact, have to be carrying the message. This matters to the entire sector and to society. When we look just at the difficulties that first-year university students have doing research for their papers, we see only one of the impacts of poor information literacy skills, don't we? So these perceptions really matter to us, and though some of them may seem discouraging, these studies, combined with our own conversations and local studies, tell us where our communities and our decision makers are now. And in our next video, we're going to look at transformative services and examine some clues about how we communicate about transformation.